Hey guys, welcome back. What you're seeing right now is the end result of what we're going to be making over the next few videos of mine. We're going to make a complete first-person player pawn, including animations, sound effects, some shooting and reloading mechanics, and a couple other bits and bobs here for a bit of extra style and effect. And then later down the line, we'll revisit it and do some more tricky things. So without further ado, let's jump straight in. And boy, do I have a monster care package for you guys. We've got everything from some textures here that we're going to use. We got some sound effects that we're going to implement. We got obviously the meshes. We got arms and our gun and AK-47, which you can see here. Just some simple hands here. And what else we got? Materials and blueprints, which we'll make as we go, and animations. We got different animations for our gun, such as shooting, reloading, and then shoot, idle, jump in, jump loot, jump start, reload, and a run animation. For our arms, we got the whole thing, the whole package. And I've gone forward and made a couple of montages here, which I will get to shortly, once we get started. So I would like to say, before we get started, that all of these assets, they've all been sourced from free locations. But like in the case of, say, these arms here, they've been extracted from Counter-Strike source, and then I've gone ahead and rigged and animated them myself. And the AK I downloaded from Turbo Squid. So we can't monetize these assets, but I can give them away to you guys for free. I do spoil you, don't I? So without further ado, let's just jump straight in and get started. First, we'll make some materials. We'll start with the AK. Get our AK material. Just right-click the texture and go to Create Material, and it will automatically plug in our texture here into our base color. And from here, all I'm going to do is just feed this straight into a multiplier. We'll multiply our value by 10, and then plug this into roughness. And that should be all that we need to do for that. Secondly, we'll go back to our content browser here, and we'll do a similar thing with our hands texture. So just right click, go to Create Material, and then we'll open this up, and a little bit like before, we're just going to come out of here into a multiplier, multiply this value, something like 44, we'll get like quite a high value here, and then we'll come out of this multiplier into an add, and we'll add an extra sort of 0.45 and plug this into roughness. I won't be instancing these materials this time because we're just going to drop them onto our models just as our basic look and feel. So then we'll jump back into our meshes folder here and open them up. So let's put in our hands material into both of these. It's going to compile the shaders real quick, but once that's done, you should see the material appear on our models. There are 2 material slots because each one of these arms has a different material ID, just in case you want to go in and edit it however you would like. And we'll do the same thing with our gun, our AK. So we'll just find our AK material and save that. And we'll save this one as well. And we'll jump back. So I'm going to leave a download link to all of these assets in the description of this video. When you're importing these into your project, make sure you import these skeletal rigs first, because when you go to import the animations, you have to tell the engine which skeleton these animations are for, otherwise they'll break and they won't work properly. So remember to import the meshes before you import the animations, and you should be perfectly hunky-dory. So the next thing we want to do is to create our player pawn, our basic player pawn. So I'm going to jump over into our first-person blueprint here and get the first-person character that should come built in with the engine. If you don't have this, if you don't see these first-person files, just come here to Add New in your content browser, go to Add Feature or Content Pack, and it should be here, the first one, and then just click Add to Project, and it'll add these files here for you to play with. So with our first-person character thing selected here, I'm just going to drag that into our little blueprints folder, and here we have our first-person character. So let me just clean up some of these tabs. All right, here we go. So we got all of this junk here, a lot of which we're not going to use. In fact, we can start deleting stuff. So let's delete this shooting blueprint here. In our construction script, we won't need that, and I don't think we're going to need some of this. These are all of our basic, our basic movement controls. Some of which we're not going to need. Like if we go to our So we've got turn rate, look up rate, move forward, move right. Yep, our turn and look up. In fact, we can get rid of the stick input. We're not going to need any of that. We're just going to need the mouse input, the movement input, and our jump here. In fact, out of release, we could get our stop jumping function just like that. And that's it. So this is our basic controls so far. And then in our viewport, here is a bunch of stuff that we're going to have to replace. For one, the arms here, we want to swap out with our... Oh, that's not the right one. Mesh 1P. These are our arms here. We want to swap this out for our arms skeletal mesh, which is these guys, FPS arms underscore rigged. So let's plug them in. FPS arms rigged. Okay, that's done. So we need to readjust where they are, obviously. So let's just reset our location up here. We need this down. What are we looking at? Well, we can delete our gun, get that out of the way. Here's our arms again. Reset our rotation and our location. Here we go. So we'll drop this down. Somewhere just below the camera. And we'll adjust some things. You'll have to tweak these for your own meshes and that kind of thing. But for this particular mesh, I'm just going to add a couple of slight values here. I want to rotate on the Z-axis 6.4 degrees to make everything line up and fit just nicely in our scene. Alright, with that done, let's just compile and then save. And we want to make ourselves a base weapon blueprint from which we can create some child blueprints and be able to not just get our AK working, but to also you know, be able to swap it out and customize different weapons for different different guns, handguns, different machine gun type things, that kind of stuff. So just make a new blueprint actor, an empty actor called weapon base, and this is going to be where we'll put our AK. So we go to add component, get ourselves a skeletal mesh. This will be our primary weapon, and we want to drag this onto our scene root. And in fact, we'll just rename this primary weapon, and then make it our AK rigged mesh. Just like that. Very cool. So far, so good. And now let's go to add component again. We're going to add a scene component. This will be our muzzle. It's going to be where the muzzle is so that we know, well, basically where the gun's firing from. Scene component is basically just a dot in space that we can just position. We can call on its rotation and its location, that kind of thing. We'll just position this behind the barrel somewhere, because we'll use this for our tracer rounds in the next video. And then compile and save that. And now we won't need to do anything in the event graph, except we'll delete these guys, and we will need to make a couple of custom events. So let's add a custom event. We want an event for shooting, an event for fire, and we want another custom event for reload. So we have our fire and our reload events. We won't need to actually build these out in this blueprint, because we'll be making it in our child blueprint. And furthermore, we're going to add some variables here. Let's add a let float, and this will be our reload time. And we want another float. This will be our bullet spread. And then we want an integer called our ammo count. Make sure we set this properly to an integer. And then one more, and we'll call it our max ammo. So these are just variables that we're going to declare in our parent blueprint here that we'll be able to call on and manipulate and change in our child blueprint, which we'll make. Well, we can make it now. Let's just right click, create child blueprint class, and this will be our AK weapon. Alright, done. Now when we open this up, you see all of these components are here. You won't see these, well, they won't be displayed here on the left, but if we say right click the graph here, and find our actions, you can see that we have the fire and the reload events, and we'll also have our variables too. So you can see our reload time, and I'll search for ammo. So we got our ammo variables here as well. So to sum up, we made a parent blueprint class which will handle all of our weapons and contain all of this basic data, and we've made a child blueprint from that where we can call on all those events and variables and that kind of thing. Okay, so let's clean up some of these tabs here. We'll go back to our character class here, and notice that our arms, they don't have any animations yet. They've got no they got no motion. So we'll go back to our content browser, into our animations folder. Let's right click and make a new animation blueprint. There we go. And we need to select the skeleton that we're going to be working from. And that is called, yeah, it's our FPS arms rigged skeleton, I believe. Oh, forgot to rename it. Let's call it arms. Oh, wait, what just happened? F2 for rename. We'll call it arms underscore NMBP. All right, and when we open it up, we see we've got our arms up the top here. We're in the event graph at the moment. And where's the... We want our anim graph as well. Oh, just real quick, let's head back to our content browser here. We've got to make sure that, yeah, our first-person character is still just called first-person character. Let's just rename this FPS Pawn BP. That way we'll just know it in the list, because otherwise there'll be multiple first-person character pawns, and we don't want that. We just want our normal one, FPS Pawn underscore BP. All right, so let's talk about animation blueprints. An animation blueprint is just another style of blueprint sort of graph here, where we determine which animation is going to be playing on the mesh at any particular time. And every skeletal mesh has to have its own unique animation blueprint in order to use them. And every animation blueprint has this, the animation graph, where we get these weird pose nodes with this little person connectee line, and we get our event graph, where we get to call off this node here, the event blueprint update animation, which will fire pretty much like an event tick, except it's only going to apply whenever the animation needs to be updated, which in the case of our pawn here will be, you know, all the time. So the first thing let's do is we'll drag off, and we need to... Actually, let's make a new function. We need a new function. This will be our cast to character. Because in order for our animation blueprint to know which animation to play, we need to get some data from the player so that we know what's going on. For example, if the player is jumping or running or even, you know, shooting, reloading, anything we want to do in the animation blueprint, we do. We need to cast to the character to get that data, so we know which to do. So let's. So we'll need to right click here. Let's try get pawn owner. So this will just, well, like it says, it's going to try and get the pawn owner, the animation instance of whoever is owning the pawn on which this animation blueprint is applied. And then out of this return value, we're just going to cast straight to our blueprint, our cast to FPS pawn underscore BP. And this node here, we can either fire it through our execution path, or we can right click, convert it to a pure cast, skip that check, and just assume that it's going to work fine. Which it should do, if that's what we're playing as. And then out of this blue as FPS pawn BP output, let's just drag off that and promote to variable, and out become a new variable. We'll call it casted character. So now, whenever we want to cast the character, we have a variable to just grab the character that we casted to. We don't have to cast to it manually every single time. So let's go back to our event graph, and out of our update animation node, what we want is a sequence, so that we can track what's going on at any given time, and then we'll drag our function in and hook up our then 0, our top output from this sequence node. Okay, so next we'll have to declare a couple of variables here before we start building out our animations, and for that, let's get our casted character. Let's get the movement component of that casted character. And then out of this return value, let's get our is falling boolean, which is a derivative of the movement component of our character. It'll just tell us if we're falling, actually. So let's drag out of this return value, promote this one to a variable, and call it is in air. So now we know when the player is in the air or not. So we'll set that out of our then one, and then come back to our casted character. Let's drag off here, get velocity. We'll get our player's velocity, and then get the length of that vector. No, it's vector length. Yeah, that's the one that we want. So we get the length of the vector, and this will translate the speed of our player in a way that makes sense, in a simple float. So 0 if they're not moving, and up to you know, whatever your maximum walk speed is in your player. So we'll come out of the vector length into a greater than, because we need to know if the length of our velocity vector is greater than 0. And if it is, we know that we're moving. So let's promote this Boolean result to a new variable here. We'll call it is moving. Okay, I hope that all makes sense, because yeah, we're just getting some basic data here from the player to declare these two variables for use in our animation graph. So let's hit up our animation graph and we'll have a look here. What we need to do is right click and make ourselves a new state machine. So we'll type in state machine. We want to add a new state machine. Call this one, we'll call it loco for locomotion. And then we also need our animation slot. So as you can see here, one of these tabs over on the right here is the animation slot manager. Now a slot is just just a fancy way for like a group of animations. So if we're making montages, or if we're using montages in our blueprint, which we will, we need to make sure that the slot where that montage is gets played by animation blueprint. So if we drag in, can we drag in? No, that's okay. We'll just right click and get our slot default slot, because it's the only one, the default slot, and then drag from our state machine into the slot, and then from the slot into our final animation pose. This final animation pose is the one that's going to play once the tree is done. There's lots that you can do here, lots of different things that we can tweak and play with. For now though, we're going to keep it as simple as possible so that we can get this thing set up. So let's double click our state machine here, our loco state machine. And this is where we're going to determine which animation is going to be playing based on the state of the player, whether they're falling, whether they're moving, running, jumping, that kind of thing. It's generally, these state machines, they're for the big motions for your character, like the general sort of base motions, like you're running, your idle, your jump. And then it's things on top of that will play, like reloading and shooting, because you can reload and shoot whether you're jumping or running or anything, but we want to always have our basic locomotion going at any particular time. So here we are in entry. Come over here to asset browser. We'll see that we have the animations that we've got declared for our arms here, and we're going to want to drag in some of these guys. So we'll drag in idle. So we'll set these to names that make sense. We'll set it to idle. We also need run. We'll drag in run. And if we, by the way, if we double click these, we see the what's going on in the state. And because we just dragged in the animation, it's just playing the animation and plugging it into the output. And that's going to be the same case with our run and all these other ones that we're going to drop in. So we'll drag in jump start, jump loop, and jump end. All right, so far so good. Now we'll drag from the entry into our idle, and this will let us know once we hit. So we compile, save. So now that we're idling, there's no rule here that we can apply from our entry. It's just going to default to the idle pose, and we can see that here. This is our idle position for our arms, and then it's from here that we get to determine other things. And if we click and drag from one of these nodes to, for example, jump start, you'll see this little icon appears on the line, and it's called a transition rule. And if we double click this, we get this Boolean result, which we can use to grab one of our variables, say, like is in air. We can get that, plug it in, then we know that we can go from idle to jump start when is in air is true. So with that done, we can do a similar thing here with our running. So if we go from idle to run, we have a rule here. We can get is moving. We'll just get that and plug that in. So if is moving is true, we will move into our run state. And then we'll drag from run back to idle. We'll get a rule going in the opposite direction. We'll double click this. We'll get is moving. We'll just get that. But we need to go from run to idle when, well, that's not right. Get that. Type in not, a not Boolean. So when is moving is not true, we go from run back to idle. All right, makes sense so far. So we got our jump start. The next thing we want to do is set up our jump loops. Oh, and we also need to go from run to jump start as well with the same rule as we did for the idle one. So we'll double click this transition. It is in air and hook that up, compile and save just to make sure that we're all good. And now we'll do our jumping. So we're going to go with our jump start animation into a jump loop animation and then to a jump end animation. This is just to smooth things out because not all jumps are going to be equal. Some jumps are going to take longer than others, like if you jump off an edge, that kind of thing. Fairly straightforward. So we'll go from jump start into jump loop. And in this rule, what we need is want our assets. So let's find our jump start. We want the time remaining of our FPS arms jump start animation. And we need that to be less than, let's say, 0.1. So we want the time left to be really, really low. So let's plug this in and it should work just fine. Next thing is our jump loop to jump end. Hook this up and then get into our rule. We transition into the jump end when we are not in the air. So we'll get that, get a knot, and hook that up. Pretty straightforward. And then from our jump end back to idle, we want our time remaining, just like before. So if we find our jump loop, where are we? Jump. Oh no, we want jump end. Here we are. We want time remaining of our jump end. And just like before, we want less than or equal to, and 0.1. Plug this into our result, hit compile and save, and that completes our very basic animation state machine. So I think it's time to test it out. So let's head back to our pawn here. Over with our mesh selected, over on the right, we've got use animation blueprint. In animation mode, we want to make our arms and in BP one that we use. So we'll compile that, and we're nearly ready. One thing we'll do though was we'll add the weapon. We'll add the weapon to our pawn here. So let's get our begin play. Where is it? Begin play. There we go. Begin play. And because we need to be able to access it as a variable, so we can draw on its events and that kind of thing, we're not going to make it a component in our actual blueprint here, but we're going to spawn it when we start. This will also help too if, say, you want your player to spawn without a weapon and then go pick one up. This is a way that you can do that. So let's spawn actor. Spawn actor from class. We want that class to be our weapon base, but the child one, our AK weapon. So let's do that, AK weapon. And we want to split this transform pin. We're not going to add any different values here. We just want to split it so that we actually get to declare the rotation, location, that kind of thing as defaults, as 0. And then out of this return value, we're going to promote this to a variable and call it, we'll call it primary weapon. There we go. So we set our primary weapon once we go begin play, and then we want to attach to component. We're going to attach our weapon to the arms. So we'll drag in our mesh 1p and drag this into parent. Our socket name is going to be, in fact, we can have a look here. If we go to our meshes, open up our arms. Oh, it's over there. There we go. Open up our arms. Let's get to our skeleton. We can see here. Well, we can't see the bones, but what we're looking for is a place to attach our gun to. So I've got this bone here that just sits in the middle of the palm, just palm_R. So if using these assets, that's the bone that you want to be looking at. If you've got your own meshes here and you don't have one of these, like an actual bone here that you can join to, you can right-click any one of these. You can add sockets, paste sockets. You know, you can add your own socket locations there. But we've got this little palm_R bone, so we're going to use that. So let's just type this in here, making sure that we get the name exactly correct, palm_R. And that should be all that we need to do. So let's compile, save, and then we need to set our FPS pawn here as our default pawn class in the world settings. Then let's hit play. All right, so where is our gun? Oh, silly me. We need to set our target here. Drag primary weapon into the target of our attached to component. Our mesh into parent. Okay, let's compile, save, hit play. And there we go. There's our AK in our hands. Animations are working fine. There's a little bit of popping. We can investigate that and have a quick check. So back in our animation blueprint, what we're looking at here is in our state machine. And then in each of our states, now these were the jumps. So if we open up our like jump start, say, we have settings over here on the right in our details panel, such as play rate, looping, checkbox, this kind of thing. And we can change some of these values to smooth out our animation as best we can. So for jump start, we just want to uncheck this loop animation checkbox, and same goes for, well, we'll check jump loop. We want our jump loop to actually be looping, and it is. And then our jump end, let's uncheck this loop animation and make it play a little quicker. So our play rate basis, we'll set this one up to 1.5. File and save that. All right, so back in the content browser here, make sure we have our FPS pawn set in our world settings. I think I mentioned that, but that's okay. And we're ready to test it out. So we'll hit play, and look at that. There we go. Oh, there's still a shadow of a gun on the ground. That's fine. We'll fix that in the next video or so. So our jump animation is now absolutely perfect. Nice and smooth, no more popping. And our run is fine. Our idle is fine. We have the arms in a nice place. We have the weapons spawning for us and everything. And yeah, I think this is where we'll leave off for this video. This is a good natural sort of stopping point. We have our animation blueprint all done. Our pawn set up. Our weapon is ready to have its firing and reloading and all that kind of jazz sorted out. And yeah, it's a good little place to leave off here. So in the next video, we're going to handle shooting and reloading. Might make some HUD elements, maybe do some other cool stuff. And yeah, we'll sort of go from there. So thanks for watching, guys. I remember myself when I was starting out with Unreal Engine that I would have considered myself to be, you know, good if I could swap out the arms and the gun in the first person template. And with this video, now you guys can too. So I hope this helps you guys, and I will catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching.